Good everyone, welcome to another episode of New Zealand Salesforce Podcast. Today with me, I got a very special guest, Andrew Hassan, who's a Salesforce delivery manager at Fronde. Andrew brings in lots of Salesforce experience on product ownership, product management, and managed service side of things. In this podcast, we'll be talking about the Salesforce managed service side of things and about product ownership. Welcome, Andrew. Welcome to my show.
Hey, Vikas.
Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to ask, how did you start your career in the Salesforce ecosystem, and what was your first role like?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. My background before Salesforce was working in the business improvement space, so more around driving better business outcomes through business process and people change and that sort of thing. But my first role in Salesforce was actually with a media company, so implementing Salesforce across their business. So that was a print media company that was trying to get a better handle on their customer relationships, but also to help their salespeople translate their print sales into digital sales. So my first job was around initially taking a look at the end-to-end business process, but as often happens with this sort of thing, once the sort of Salesforce platform build was completed, they needed someone who could actually explain and train and maintain and own that platform. And so I sort of slotted into that role because it just sort of worked really well. I mean, from a business improvement perspective in the media industry, the most important thing is revenue, right? And so if you're doing a Salesforce implementation, you're going to drive revenue, and that's kind of what it was all about. So yeah, a challenging role, and sort of went through lots of different sort of phases. And from my first sort of hands-on and using Salesforce and Classic through to using it in Lightning now. But it was a really exciting time, and it was a pretty awesome platform. And what kind of I found amazing about it was that a lot of the stuff that historically I've been doing around business improvement was around actually getting people to follow business process, implementing automations that were all sort of outside of like the core systems. But with Salesforce, you had this platform where you could actually design that in, where things were just were sort of built with that in mind, and very configurable, very scalable, and so getting that sort of validation and customization, wasn't a big change process. It was something that you could just build in to make life easier for people. And look, if that taught me anything, working alongside salespeople, you appreciate that their job is actually a really hard job. And they're in a situation where they need you to take away as much of the sort of non-selling related tasks as you can, and so we pushed pretty hard to get it done. And that made a big difference, I think, to their ability to sell, and I guess how confident they felt in front of customers.
Right, that's right. I mean, that's one of the advantages of Salesforce, right? It makes the job so easy. I mean, I think the Salesforce, when they started for the first time, they wanted to target the salespeople, but I mean, they've gone way beyond that. Now you can do a lot of stuff. And like you said, the automation is one of the biggest advantage. Right. So that's pretty cool. Thank you very much for that. So what aspects of the role did you find most challenging?
Yeah, most challenging. Well, it depends on what you're talking about, right? I mean, if we're talking about product ownership, you're always trying to juggle the priorities, and I'll be very suspicious of any product owner that has more budget than they have problems, right? So you're always trying to juggle different stakeholder needs and make those judgment calls, but also try and apply what's going to get the most bangs for your buck. More recently, sort of working in a managed service space, the biggest challenge would probably be more around because in managed services, I'm providing break fix support as well as continuous improvement sort of solutions for a number of customers. So the biggest challenge in that space is probably more around the context switching. So rather than being an expert at a really deep level in one particular business and the roadmap for that business and the issues and problems with that business, you're forced to be, I guess, spread a lot more thinly across a lot more different businesses. So at any one time, I'll probably be across 5 or 6 different orgs in a given week, and needing to sort of shift context from okay, well, this is company A, and their industry is this, and their priorities are that, and this is how sophisticated their org is. So needing to make decisions that are appropriate to that particular business, and deliver changes which sort of meet their expectations and their needs and their priorities is kind of tricky.
Right, that's right. Okay, that's cool. So coming to the managed service, right? I just wanted to dig in a bit more. So, do you think that the Salesforce managed service is the best way to go forward for companies who run Salesforce as as the main product for their business?
So, could you just repeat that question, Vickers?
Oh yeah, so I was saying about the managed service, right? So, do you think that Salesforce managed service is the best way to go forward for businesses who works on Salesforce space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, having been in that product owner space, what a managed service gives you is, I guess, a bit of security, and I guess that it takes away some of those sleepless nights. So you know that you have somebody, an expert pair of hands that can guide you through some of the decisions that you're going to struggle to make. And bear in mind, in that sort of space, you've got a sort of a bench of quite experienced Salesforce professionals who've been, seen a lot of different types of issues and challenges, and chances are if you have a problem, they would have encountered it before, or if not, they've got a pretty clear pathway to resolve. So, look, I think it kind of helps an awful lot to have access to those sort of resources, and so you can focus on the priorities of your business, and when you're outside of your comfort zone, you can bring in some expert resource, or you've got the other angle where there are other sort of aspects of managed service where when you're running out of capacity to get the business improvement type stuff done, and you want to focus on your sort of big rocks within your product roadmap, but you still have stakeholders that need to be sort of kept happy, you can pass that off to a partner who can provide that go forward. The other thing which is pretty helpful as a product owner with a managed service arrangement is you can have someone who's essentially got your back to I guess review what's coming down the pipe with your Salesforce releases, and be able to interpret that into and put that in context around your org. So, hey, there's a great opportunity with the Winter 21 release. You should be focusing on this particular functionality, or actually, do you know what? In February, you're going to need to sort of change the way your users log into your org, and that's going to be a big deal. You need to start thinking about that now. You need to have multi-factor authentication implemented. So, what's your plan? And so, it helps you, I guess, outsource some of the hard decisions, but also gives you that comfort that the decisions that you're making are the right ones.
That's right. That's right. So you think it's safer to assume that the Salesforce managed service plays a big role in reducing the cost on the customer side?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it kind of depends on I guess the stability of your org, and it depends on a number of other factors, right? So if you've got a reasonably sized sort of core team, you can be reasonably self-sufficient. But what you find in a lot of cases is businesses, either don't have the budget to invest in a permanent full-time team, or maybe they don't have sufficient work to keep them occupied, for a full-time. Or the other thing, which we're seeing increasingly in New Zealand, are struggling to secure and retain that Salesforce talent. A lot of businesses are finding it really tough to recruit or retain both functional and technical skills within their business, and that's something we can provide from our bench, and have them, I guess, stabilized and performing, and I guess securing their investment in the platform, even if that's just for a short period of time while they're sort of filling roles, or that can be cost effective in the medium term. So yeah, it means different things for different people. For some of the smaller businesses, it makes sense to have a reasonably low headcount, and actually you can get some of the specialist stuff done through a managed service contract. But in some of the bigger businesses, maybe overflow from their sort of core team, or filling gaps when they don't have capacity.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. You touched about a very important topic, MFA, right, which is getting very popular in Salesforce space, right? So do you think that customer finds that challenging? I know that most of them hasn't implemented MFA yet, and now Salesforce saying, okay, let's get into MFA. They wanted to bring it in MFA. So based on your experience, how challenging is implementation of MFA from a customer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't a Salesforce specific issue. I think, the recent events in Waikato with the ransomware attack, and that's, not just an issue in New Zealand, but globally, is really, putting that whole security of access and identity management really front and center for a lot of people in the market at the moment. And it's not just about accessing Salesforce, but hey, there's a lot of really valuable, really crucial information that's about, in people's CRMs that they need to protect. Generally, MFA, it doesn't need to be a big deal, and actually, having implemented it with one or two customers, 6 or 7 times in multiple environments, you can, if you've got, all your ducks in a row, it can take sort of 15, 20 minutes to actually get it up and running and implement it. But, there's a lot of, I guess, institutional knowledge that you kind of need to have to make that seamless and to implement that effectively. There's a couple of different parts to it. There's a single sign-on, but there's also user provisioning and deprovisioning, which can get a bit trickier. But getting that functioning is really important. And generally, most businesses will be using either Azure AD or Google Identity. Both of those platforms integrate really nicely into Salesforce. But look, even if you aren't using that kind of identity management, the Salesforce Lightning Login or Authenticator is a perfectly good option in that space. And you kind of need to deal with it. I mean, Salesforce kind of does this, fairly regularly. There'll be like a major change that needs to be implemented, globally, and they're great at providing you with the resources to be able to get it done right.
Right.
And I guess another good example, I guess the most recent one would have been the guest user permission thing. And pretty much anybody who had a Visual Force page or a set of Salesforce sites or a customer community actually had to make some changes to continue working. And that's also a good opportunity, I think, to bring in a consultant, a managed service consultant who can provide you with a bit of direction around, hey, this is the issues that you need to address. And it's one of those sort of smaller things that we'd often pull within a managed service contract. I mean, because essentially it's not a sort of major change, but it's technical debt that just has to be addressed. And if you don't address that, you'll find yourself in a bit of a challenging situation sort of come February, where every user in your organisation has to have MFA sort of configured, and if they don't, you've got a bit of a problem.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing is that most of the government firms, right, they're a bit picky on the side of things when it comes to security aspect. So having an MFA touch, right, will kind of give them an assurance, right? Salesforce is pretty curious about the security side, even though, like you said, that right in Azure and AD will do the pretty good job. But that being said, just now, like, a recent experience with one of the government firms, that they're very much into, the Salesforce security is not so great. So having an MFA is just an extra layer of security. So yeah, that's
absolutely. And look, if you implement it really well, it can be easier than the username and password, and that's great, right? It makes life easier and for all of your users. And so, yeah, it can be a bit confusing. And I guess the consequences of messing it up, add a bit of tension to the whole situation. But, if you execute it well, it actually, makes your life a hell of a lot easier.
Right. Okay. Now, another question I just wanted to ask around the tech depth, right? Since we talked about the managed service role, and especially from a New Zealand point of view, right? We are seeing a massive surge in the Salesforce requirement, and Salesforce demand is growing, right? And now, but that brings with the challenge as well, right? People find a lot of opportunities to move elsewhere. So when we talk about the managed service role, right, and tech depth, how difficult do you think to retain a talent, right? So because obviously we're going to sell them, managed service to a customer, but the customer is like, oh, okay, but it's very hard to retain a talent. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're finding it difficult to recruit people, and we're having lots of our customers are actually asking for help to find people that have got Salesforce experience and Salesforce skills. Certainly, when I've been client side, I've often had systems administrators that I've sort of built up over a number of years that are sort of almost doubling their salary overnight, and it's very difficult to compete in that market. To retain your skills, and I guess in that situation, you need to, I guess, prioritize what you're doing. So it did answer your question because I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's pretty good. I was just gonna ask on that context, but that's all good. So that comes to my another question around the self-certification, right? So that's one. I've been asking these questions to other guests as well. Do you think the Salesforce certification plays an important role, or you think it's not really important, or does it help, to sell a service to a customer saying, oh, look, we got certified consultants?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And I guess my experience in that space, I actually got certified quite late. So I was a product owner for probably 3 or 4 years before I had my first certification. What tends to happen in that scenario is your org fantastically well. You know everything that's relevant to your business. And keeping the lights on and keeping things running and meeting your sort of your business needs fantastically well. But what certification kind of forces you to do is to expand that knowledge into the whole domain. So it's not just about what's relevant to you. So look, if your business isn't using sort of enterprise territory management, you don't find out about it. If your business isn't using Service Cloud, there's a whole raft of objects you never even need to touch. But when you go down the certification route, it kind of forces you to have, I guess, quite a broad set of knowledge and understand lots of other things. And to be honest, I think when I was doing my Sales Cloud certification and my Service Cloud certification, I probably learned about new products that I should have been using. And got a lot of insight around actually where I could deliver some real value for my business. So, I think from a pure product management and product ownership perspective, I would, definitely encourage, product owners or systems administrators to go down that certification route, both because it helps you better understand your own org and what the options and best practice looks like, but also it helps you consolidate the skills that you've learned on the job, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people have that sort of knowledge that's particularly relevant to a particular industry or a real niche, but when you have certification, that's essentially demonstrating that you've got transferable skills, and that opens up a whole raft of other windows and doors for you to sort of shift elsewhere within the ecosystem and I guess pursue other roles that are on the platform, and that's something which is pretty unique to Salesforce. I guess, for example, I sort of trained and I graduated as a chemical engineer, and that kind of restricts, my job prospects to operating in like a heavy industry or a chemical engineering space. But if you take a look at sort of certification in Salesforce, there's probably 90% of the FTSE 100 or the NZSE 50 sort of businesses are sort of using this product and this platform. You can, deliver meaningful and valuable sort of change and support in a real short space of time in any of those businesses, because you're essentially operating and configuring the same platform. There's no degree that the university or a technical institute offers that gives you that same breadth of transferable skills or that same breadth of industries that you can shift between. And that's something which is super important and super valuable and helps you flex and manage your career. So yeah, 2 key things about certification: helps you, do better at your current job, actually, but it also gives you, that ability to demonstrate that you've got the transferable skills, and you can shift into pretty much any industry you want to.
Yeah, that's right. I personally find certifications very valuable as well, especially when I was doing the integration one, because I know I used something called MuleSoft, and I
Mm.
MuleSoft, which is pretty powerful. That's cool.
It's pretty hard though. I mean, don't talk down. It's you've got to put the time in, and you can't just expect to walk through them, and it's stressful as well. I probably have 2 or 3 certs that I should have done, that I know I can pass, and I know I've got the skills and the domain knowledge, but just finding the time out of work time and home time is really challenging. But I always find once you have committed that time and energy and effort, you generally it helps you in so many different ways. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And since you mentioned that about the chemical engineering, heavy lifting industry, right? The Salesforce, from my experience, pretty much used in most of the industries. Like, one of the in my previous job, I worked for a company where we had a client, pharmaceutical companies. They're using Salesforce, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, like you said, it's a transferable skill, right? You can jump from one industry to another industry as long as you know the product. So yeah, so looking into the future, right? So Salesforce is going at a very faster rate. So do you think that more Salesforce? Do you recommend people from a different group to learn Salesforce? Say someone is working on a different platform, right? So, and they were thinking to learn Salesforce. Do you think that it's a great move?
I think you probably know the answer to that question, because yeah, of course it is. It's a fantastic move, and I think one thing which is really important for people to understand is that the barriers to entry to becoming a Salesforce expert are pretty low. You've got really helpful and accessible and thorough training material, which is available through Trailhead. You have a sort of wide range of different sort of user groups and communities that you can actively participate for free. You're not looking at a huge investment of anything other than your time. And I guess the number of colleagues and staff members who I've seen develop and grow, from reasonably entry-level roles into really fantastic jobs in a really short space of time is amazing. I think the other thing is to bear in mind, and people talk about it a lot, there is a massive skills gap in Salesforce skills, and so if I were to be training and entering the sort of job market, right now, it would be absolutely a no-brainer. Even actually, if I was looking for a part-time job, while I was at university, or even at high school, it really, if you've got a solid sort of set of skills around understanding businesses and understanding data and that sort of thing, it's so accessible and so easy to sort of get yourself underway and get yourself moving forwards. It's definitely a no-brainer. So look, I'd encourage anyone who's even in a sort of job break, between roles, or searching for the next challenge, or wondering what to do next, just get stuck in. You can, I've seen people who move from like a sales support role, earning 30 or 40K to being a Salesforce functional consultant in the space of a year. And that's not a huge amount of training, but it's a massive move in terms of your marketability and your earning potential, and I guess the types of challenges that you get in your day-to-day job. It's incredibly rewarding to be able to sort of architect and build out a platform that essentially runs a business, and you don't really get to engage with those types of sort of stakeholders on other career paths. Many of my sort of colleagues and I were sort of my first role in the Salesforce space for talking with a sales director and the CEO on a regular basis. It's that important. You don't, and being in those situations, you get to learn so much so quickly, not just about your platform, but actually about what's important to the CEO, what's important to the sales director, what's important to the marketing director. What brings revenue in the door. How do we forecast that revenue? What makes a good salesperson? What makes a bad salesperson? These are skills that can help you in any role that you choose to take in the future.
That's cool. That's cool. Thank you very much for that. I think, even the high school kid, like you said, right? I mean, they can, have a look at it. It's a pretty great opportunity to do, to get started with the part-time. And if they like it, they can, proceed. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much what I wanted to ask today, Andrew. You've been very helpful. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, really appreciate it. I know it's, 5:30. So really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Thanks for calling me, because hopefully at some point in the future we'll be able to have this kind of a chat with a beer. But yeah, we sort of seem to be remote with you down in Palmy. Should catch up sometime.
Cool. Thank you. Cheers.
All right. See you later, mate. Bye.
Yeah, bye.